The Definitive Guide to Horde Chess. This is the title of a book which I am doing a report on. I have the book with me right now. So this is the cover. This is the back. This book is about 123 pages long, so pretty short book. Let's just go through the presentation. The skeleton of the presentation runs as follows. First, I will introduce the book. Secondly, describe the purposes of the book. Third, describe some things I liked about the book. I'm not sure if there's like a laser pointer that I can use. 4, issues with the book, so the problems with it. And then after that, I will grade the book and then draw a conclusion. The title is The Definitive Guide to Horde Chess. The subtitle is Openings, Strategies, and Tactics for White and Black. The author is Enigma Chess, so they are an anonymous author. They are also independently published. The copyright date is 2021, April. This book is a guide on concepts found in the chess variant known as Horde, also known as Dussinese chess, intended for all levels. So the purposes of the book are multi-dimensional. Well, basically the chapter is divided in white and black, so there's like 2 big chapters. It will actually also be fundamental opening theory plus strategies for white, and then fundamental opening theory plus strategies for black. So there's some questions about the nature of the game of Horde that this book attempts to answer. So for the attractions, I liked 4 things about this book. So strategies, it has a really nice breakdown and summary of all the principles you should follow when you play one color. I don't normally see that in a book, but useful thing to include in a book. So in this diagram on the left, it is black to play, and you can go ahead and think about it because I will touch back on it after a few minutes. It's on the next few slides. First attraction, tips for white. There are 9 total tips. Here are the first 5. There are a couple problems with the specific advice in terms of strategy and Horde, but I will touch on that when I discuss the issues. I agree with all these tips except for numbers 4 and 6. 4 and 6 are gravely flawed. The rest seem fine to me. On the top right, I quoted the author. It's about this diagram here, the left pawn capturing the black pawn on the right. That's right, because if white takes with the left pawn, then he cannot reinforce it the next move because his next frontmost d-pawn is quite far away. It's better to capture with the f-pawn. F takes e6, so the pawn from the right. Because black plays a move, white can reinforce the pawn next move by pushing the next f-pawn, following the first principle of doubly defending advanced pawns. Super important. There are also tips for black, of course. The first 4 I think I pretty much agree with all 7 of these tips. Okay, for number 3 of trading a minor piece for 2 pawns, you don't always want to do that. There's this kind of myth circulating Horde that like it's always good for black to trade a piece off for 2 pawns. That's not always true. In fact, maybe half the time it's not true, because if you sacrifice too many pieces, then you run out of weapons to break through somewhere or to create problems like some holes in white's position. Alright, on the top right, I have another quote about this diagram. That's right, in this position, black can sacrifice the rook on a3 because after white takes it, black can bring his queen to a4, threatening to take on a3, and then if white defends with b2, black can take the c2 pawn and break through. So that's on page 82. Okay, second attraction. This book covers thematic patterns. There are a few important ones it touches on, which is great. Here is perhaps the most iconic one. On the left, there's a lot of arrows, so the green arrows are the moves that will always be played. The yellow arrows are circumstantial arrows, so like maybe you will place the knight to b6 or to c5, depends on what white does. And then the red arrow is also like circumstantial. In some cases, the bishop wants to sacrifice on c5 after black first trades there with a pawn, right? The blue arrow is like the end result. That's like the last move to make. So after the sequence of events, black wants to be left with a rook on a4. I quote Enigma Chess here saying, this is on page 76. So to recap, move your center pawns, put the knight on d7, play a5, okay, trade on b4, then free a square on either b6 or c5 for the knight, and then sacrifice on a4 with the knight so that you can put the rook on a4. May be hard to follow, especially if you are not a Horde chess player, but that is the most important thematic pattern in all of Horde, because more than half of openings for white revolve around weakening this specific exact plan for black of trading off the knight on a4 for 2 pawns, with the rook making the final capture. Third attraction is there are some interesting puzzles, so let me pull it up. In this position, it is black to move and be winning. Most players might be inclined to sacrifice the rook on a2 because that forces a breakthrough. However, white has a lot of pawns compared to the material which black has, and so it's actually too slow for black. The best move in this position, believe it or not, is rook c5. And I quote the author here, right, so b4 does not repel that threat. b3 would repel that threat, but then maybe black can just play queen a3 and get behind the back rank without sacrificing any material. This is on page 119. Super good puzzle. This is probably the best part of this book. I love this example. Yeah, because rook takes a2 is very natural, but it's bad. Rook c5 is the best move. That's one of the parts that I got something out of from this book. And then my final thing I liked was the FAQ section. These are located on pages 121 through 123. I put up 3 questions. I think there's like 10 questions or something. These 3 questions interested me personally. Okay. Which side has the advantage in Horde chess? Okay, here's my take on it. I'm not quoting the book, so I have no reason to believe that black does not have an advantage. I think black has a very strong advantage, probably winning, based on multiple reasons. However, it's not so important because when I play a game of Horde, I don't really evaluate the position as it is now. What I do is try to think of best move compared to all the other options I have. So I do evaluate like my calculations, like the end position of my calculations, and I compare them with other calculations and determine the best idea. But I don't really evaluate the position objectively. But when it comes to opening theory, of course it is useful to evaluate the objective position so that you can choose your openings. But Horde is not a solved game, so there are a lot of openings that are in limbo, and it's hard to prove that one side is winning or something. But I think based on a lot of evidence, such as game analysis of the highest level games, as well as trends in the opening preferences, I think black should probably win in the start position. Okay, and then can Horde chess improve my standard chess skills? So my personal take is not really, probably not. It did not for me. It seems to make absolutely zero difference in my regular chess skill. So I decided to quote one of the answers from the author. The question, has Horde chess been solved? So I will leave out the answers to the other two questions which I put up because I don't want to put out too much content inside the book. I just want to give a sneak peek. I will mention what the author means by that there was a certain online player able to consistently win against any opponent. This is about Genesis of the Omega. This user was kind of an enigma on Lichess. When he first made the account, he was the absolute top Horde player. It was also right after the famous non-peril got banned on Lichess. The user that would inflate his rating 600 points, ridiculous amount, 3,000 plus with tons of alt accounts. A lot of people suspect that Genesis is the same guy as non-peril. But anyway, this user got banned for cheating, I guess, and was also the person that claimed to be able to consistently win in Horde and solved Horde. So this post at the top is his original post on a forum thread that he made. Grandmaster George doesn't exist. There's no Grandmaster named George. Unless that's an English version of a foreign name. So he's challenging people to 14 days per move correspondence where he is black. So this guy just absolutely wanted to inflate his rating, I guess. Yeah, none of that happened. Also, he lost 20 games from timing out because he just stopped using the account. And I guess maybe because he got banned, I'm not sure which happened first, the ban or stopping the playing. Here are some issues of the book. First issue, bad advice. The author writes, do not initiate a pawn exchange. This is bad advice. The logic behind the author's advice is that trading a pawn, initiating the trade, leaves a hole in the center that black can easily exploit and loses control and initiative. Remember when I described that rule as being bad back in this slide? Number 4, do not initiate a pawn exchange. This is where I talk about why it is bad advice. The problem with this advice is that it's just very baseless. To say do not initiate a pawn exchange because it leaves the hole, it loses time and control, that's baseless. First of all, there are a lot of openings where white should make many exchanges. One example is after the moves d5, e6, d4, d6. The best idea for white there is to trade 3 times in the center. So c takes d6, c takes d6, d takes e6, f takes e6, and f takes e6. And then bishop takes e6, f5, bishop c8, a5. And what I'm getting at here is that this strong line for white, by trading 3 times, not only does not lose tempo and time and leave holes, but it actually creates time. It clears more space for his pawns to advance while kicking the bishop on e6 with tempo. So it gains time in the sense that after black has to recapture with a bishop because he's left with no pawns to recapture with, he will have to deal with the fact that white's pawn kick will kick that bishop with tempo, gaining time. And then secondly, white gains control by trading because it clears space for the pawns on the same file to advance by clearing those pawns out. So no, initiating a pawn exchange does not give up time, it does not give up control, and it does not create holes in your position. Absolutely bad advice. It would be better to say, always initiate pawn exchanges if black will be left with only a piece to recapture on the last trade with. Okay, second issue. Misinformation. The book claims that after d5, e6, d4, d6, which is the diagram on the left, that move 3, c6 is the best punishment, or one of the punishments. It's true that black's move 2, d6 is inferior, but it is not true that c6 punishes it. Playing c6 would allow black to undermine the queen side by playing trading on d5, for example, then playing a5, then knight e7, trading 3 times on c6, as well as opening the a file, and there are ways to force a breakthrough on the queen side. So, the book is giving out wrong information in saying that 3c6 is punishing black's move to d6. Okay, similarly, the author also claims that a5 is punishing this move to d6. Absolutely not true. After black trades in the center, this transposes into the main line of move 1 d5 e6 to a5, which black is absolutely fine in. So this move 3 a5 is not creating any problems for black, and gives up white's chance of gaining an advantage. Also, the author claims that black's e6 is the best reply to both a5 and h5. If you follow the world champion Mindhunter, he almost always replies d6 against the move 1 a5. I myself always play d6 because I followed in the footsteps of Mindhunter, because back when I was learning Horde and relatively new to it, I just started by checking out some games of the highest rated player, which was Mindhunter, and he would always play d6 on the first move here. Also, there is this new chess engine that's like a neural network, I think, called Multi-Ara. It's a fork of Crazy Ara, which is a Crazy House engine that runs on Monte Carlo analysis. So there's this bot called Multi-Ara that's available on Lichess. And in fact, when it plays black, it actually has a tendency to respawn d6 against a5. I believe the engine is not tampered in any way, and somehow it manages to find Mindhunter's opening choice against the move 1 a5. So, okay, e6 is acceptable for black, absolutely, it's one of the main lines, but d6 is more in fashion. Against h5, you can play d6, you can play e6, you can play a5. They are most likely to transpose into a separate system, but against h5, I would like to play d6 anyway. So, the book is wrong in saying that e6 is somehow the best, when in fact they probably most likely tie for best with another move that is more popular and more convincing. Okay, the author claims that flank openings are not popular at the highest level because they do not lead to a big enough advantage. This diagram I have here on the left is one of the most common opening tabea in flank openings. So white pushed a5, black went d6, white pushed he traded on d6 and then pushed h5. So white's strategy behind these flank pawn pushes is to prevent black from opening the A and H files as easily and creating an infiltration by force. So here's the problem with the author's claims. First of all, A5 is popular in the World Championships. Most top players usually pair A5 with like another move. For example, Mindhunter will pair A5 with E5, Steubenfish will pair D5 with A5. Although I see him now playing E5 as well. And then Cinnamon just plays all four moves, but mostly also A5 and E5, I think. The other problem is that white has no starting advantage, and the book admits that at some point. So there's actually some conflicting information in this book because, first of all, they claim that this does not lead to a big enough advantage, as if white had an advantage anyway. And secondly, the book says that white does not have an advantage. It's not determined, right? Okay, sixth issue is that there are some bad puzzles. So this puzzle is white to move and draw, and it's a bad example because white only has one move on this first move, which is pawn to g7. Because you do not want to play f takes g8 right here on the first move, because after king takes g8 and g7, black can capture rook takes g7, allowing e7. But it's very easy to see that g7 is practically the only choice here, so it's just too easy of a puzzle, too few things to consider. Oh, and also there is another bad puzzle where the stronger side has like 3 ways to win. Here are some miscellaneous issues. First of all, the author is anonymous. If they're rating 1600 or lower, then you can't really trust anything they say without backing it up like a crazy ton or maybe quoting some people. If they're 2600, then it is easier to trust what they're saying. All of those things would be extremely important information that makes the statistics have a single bit of meaning. If we look at a page, it's in single column, which is less readable, in my opinion, than double column, where you split it in half and you can fill in more text that way. In my opinion, books should almost always be double columned. It's probably more natural on the eyes. Single column books just come off as a little bit lazy to me. It's just a little bit harder to read. Space that could have been filled up. That's about it for the issues and everything. Now I'm going to evaluate the book. I graded it a 10 out of 30 because a lot of the information is bad. Like, I go only 30 pages in and I already see 6 things that it says is wrong. Tons of misinformation. On the other hand, there are some things that are correct that I have to give credit for. So I think 10 out of 30 is a fair score. I thought they were pretty good. There were a few flaws. For example, the statistical table was not well explained. Also, some of the answers were too vague and generalized to some of the hypothetical questions it poses, like in the FAQ, as well as maybe some of the strategies. The examples I gave 10 out of 20, so basically mediocre, because a few of the examples were bad, but also there was one really good puzzle, like one really good example, right? So kind of hit or miss. Okay, completeness, 10 out of 15. Because it could include more commentated games. There are only 4 games. Again, did not elaborate on the statistical table. It could have provided more meaning and usefulness. So, also it's a short book, right? It's only like 123 pages long. So, For being a quote-unquote definitive guide to Horde chess, I would say it's not 100% complete on its purpose. And then finally, enjoyability. 0 out of 10, I put 8 out of 10. I like those books by Harding Simple because the smell is good. I put an 8 out of 10 because it's the only book that exists in Horde, I guess. If there were more Horde books, then I guess the enjoyability would drop down quite a bit because it's very possible to write a book that's much better than this one. So in total, I graded it a 58 out of 100. This puts it slightly below 3 stars, which I think is a very fair and reasonable grade. Roughly 2.8 or 2.9 stars, I guess. Yeah, 2.9 stars. I think that one puzzle that I liked a lot was a super good example, but they would have to attentively look at every detail and then pull out a separate notepad, say, this is wrong, here is the improvement. And that's about it. So 2.9 stars grade, I guess, slightly below 3. I hope this was useful. Take care.